across the fence, we're tracking Vermont's wild turkeys. We'll see the beauty of these birds and learn about their history, their health, and their habitat. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Wild turkeys in Vermont are a wildlife success story. They've made a comeback from near extinction, and they're now widespread throughout the state. To learn more, we've called on a veteran biologist with Vermont's Department of Fish and Wildlife. My guest is Chris Bernier. Chris formerly headed the department's Fur Bearer Project and now leads the Wild Turkey Project. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, being the new face of the Turkey Project, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and your goals regarding turkeys.
Sure. So first, I'd just like to say that I could not be more excited about this new position and carrying on the legacy of incredible turkey management and conservation that we've had here in the state of Vermont. I am a new face to the Turkey Project, but I'm not a new face to the department. I started here in 1994, and I've worn many hats in the 23 years since. I started as a technician in the Springfield district, where I was responsible for essentially implementing the data collection procedures that we have for both the Fisheries Division and the Wildlife Division. And I eventually transitioned into a specialist role, which is still somewhat of a technician, but it's taking on more responsibilities with designing some of the data collection procedures and then overseeing the staff that implement them. And then in 2010, I had an opportunity to jump into the leadership role of the Fur Bearer Project, and I took that on and had that role until just recently. And today actually is the first day of my third month in the turkey leadership role. So it's going to be a humbling experience, I'm sure, and I look forward to the challenges ahead with turkeys and to work with the constituents, the general public, in turkey management. And it's interesting that I actually am not a native Vermonter. I grew up in Maine, and by the time I had left Maine, there still were no turkeys in the region that I spent my time in, including at the University of Maine in Orono. So turkeys weren't really a part of my lexicon in the early days. I didn't get into turkey hunting or even turkey management until I moved here to Vermont. In fact, one of my most memorable field tasks I got involved with is, I think it was the mid-1990s, I had two opportunities to join Doug Blodgett, a former turkey biologist here in the state, to actually trap and transport turkeys from Rutland County to Grand Isle County, which maybe we'll talk about in a bit, but that was an exciting and memorable experience, to say the least. So.
Tell us a little bit about the history of turkeys in Vermont, because up until, a few generations ago, there weren't any wild turkeys in Vermont.
Yeah, their story is not unlike many other animals here in Vermont. During settlement times, 1700s, 1800s, we converted our forests to ag land largely, and turkeys are a forest species. And so they took a big hit with respect to habitat, and of course there were unregulated hunting and take of the species in that time. And so what few turkeys could hold on were, based on habitat, were actually extirpated due to unregulated take. There were efforts to restore the turkey once forests began to return in the early 1900s, mid-1900s. There were several efforts to stock game farm turkeys, which were several generations removed from the wild turkey, and they didn't fare well. They didn't succeed. They had lost enough of their wildness, if you will, to really give them an edge here in Vermont's winters and habitats that we had. It wasn't until 1969, I think it was, where we did, the department oversaw our first wild turkey restoration effort. And amazingly, it started with 17 New York birds that were trapped in New York and released in Paulet, Vermont in 1969. And then in 1970, another 14 birds out of New York were similarly trapped and relocated here into Hubbardton. And the population that we have today stems from those 31 birds, which is an incredible success story.
Yeah, what is the status and the health of turkeys today?
Oh boy, they are an abundant species. We estimate the population better than 50,000 birds statewide. They're in every nook and cranny of the state. We have hunting seasons for them in every part of the state. All wildlife management units of the state are open in the spring. Most wildlife management units are open for fall shotgun hunting as well at this point. Yeah, so they are doing very well, very healthy.
And we talked earlier about the brood survey. What are sort of the mating and reproduction habits of turkeys?
Mating and habitat of, well, they're two different things. The mating behavior, I think most Vermonters are familiar with and seeing them out in the fields in the spring, April and May, where the toms, the big gobblers, are out displaying, trying to attract a hen. So that is the mating season, and then they go into sitting on their nests, which account for 10 to 12 eggs on average, and they're sit on the nest for up to 26, 28 days before hatching. The habitat that they choose for rearing, sitting on the nest and then rearing the poults, the young turkeys, are different from the habitats that we typically think of as turkey habitats. So they look for really shrubby areas. The nest consists of depression in the forest floor with a lot of dense vegetation covering it for concealment cover. And then when the poults are born or hatched, they seek out openings where there's a lot of vegetation, but also a lot of insects. They're high in protein, easy to collect, and that's really what builds those small poults into the adult turkeys, is that foraging in those fields.
Which is why a lot of people see them.
That's right, yeah.
And so how do turkeys fare in the winter?
They do pretty well. It depends on the winter severity, of course. They are adapted for, life in winter. Extreme conditions in the winter does have an impact on them. And extreme conditions might be deep, fluffy snow, prolonged cold. When you have a crust or snow that's capable of holding them, they still can get around on that, and you'll see tracks on top of the March snow. It's a pretty common sight. They're scavenging for the seeds, the late fallen seeds from various plant species. So when you have those conditions, they do pretty well. It's those long, prolonged cold with deep, fluffy snow that hinder their movement where you get into trouble.
Which is why the bigger populations are in southern part of the state. Is that accurate?
That's correct, right?
What's the legal turkey hunting season in Vermont?
Well, there are a variety of turkey hunting opportunities in Vermont. The most popular is the spring season. That's the month of May, and that's when most of the turkeys are harvested. That is limited to 2 bearded turkeys per hunter. There's also a youth season, which is the last full weekend of April. That's growing in popularity, and those youth are allowed 1 bearded turkey. The fall seasons are a little bit more complicated in that they're not, they vary in length in zone. So
Right.
The whole state is open for a 14-day fall bow and arrow season. And then there's a 9-day shotgun season, which is open through most of the WMUs, the wildlife management units. And then there is a 16-day shotgun season, which is open primarily for like the Taconic wildlife management units in the southern Champlain Valley, Addison County.
And you think that the youth hunting aspect is really important?
It certainly is. Turkeys provide us an incredible opportunity to recruit youth, and it should be no surprise to anyone that youth have a lot of competing interests right now, a lot of things, a lot of activities,
Right.
Not to mention the virtual world that we seem to live in these days. And so we're seeing less and less youth get involved in the outdoors in this way. And turkeys are a great gateway to a life of hunting because they're less intimidating than, say, deer or bear. But also the seasons are at a time of year where it's fun to be out. Not that being out in November is not fun, but it's cold, and and that does impact youth's enjoyment. May is an incredible time to get out and about in the woods, and youths certainly enjoy that. It's also hunters have a high success rate for turkeys, and so with a modest amount of effort and time, you can actually come home with a turkey. And the reason why recruitment of youth is important is because the opportunity to engage in our ecosystem in that way, to participate in the ecology of our landscape, really leaves those participants with an enduring connection to the landscape, and that translates to conservationists down the road, people who understand habitat, who understand animal behavior and have a deep appreciation for it, and then want to conserve those resources. And so we'd like to see more youth get out, and I think turkeys is a great way to do it.
Now, you mentioned that wild turkeys are considered big game by state law, along with moose, black bear, white-tailed deer. What's the process for managing big game, and how is the public involved in that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things here. First off, I am the leader of the Turkey Project, but I'm by no means by myself. There are still 4 former turkey biologists in the department's ranks that I can call upon at any time for help. We have a big game team, which is made up of veteran biologists, law enforcement, administrative staff, and so all decisions about turkey management really come from those discussions at the team level. And then the other thing is that we follow a big game plan. So turkeys, as you said, are a big game species, as are moose, deer, and bear. And we have 10-year plans. We're coming toward the end of one such plan, and we're beginning the process of implementing or developing the next 10-year plan. And that is a very public process. We'll be engaging the public, hunters, wildlife watchers, farmers, anybody. Will be at the table to give us their opinions, their feedback, their expertise, and hopefully through the public process and with sound data to back it, we can come up with a plan that will meet certain objectives that we set for the turkey population and for hunting and maintaining healthy populations.
And it's important for the public to know that this is something that's ongoing, that is looked at. You know, you don't just wing it when it comes to thinking about the health of different species.
Well, that's absolutely correct. Yeah. For example, we know that diseases are an issue for turkeys. I mean, they are an abundant and healthy species, but they're not immune from various diseases. And so we are developing protocols to monitor and to respond to disease outbreaks. You know, anything with wildlife and management has to be fluid because things change. You might get one bad winter and your turkey population could plummet, and then you have to be able to adjust the course accordingly.
Now, we usually see turkeys on the ground. We've been looking at some footage, but they do fly.
Oh, absolutely. They are strong flyers, but they're not long flyers. So they really move about primarily on the ground by foot. But interestingly, they have the lowest wing area to body weight ratio of many birds, not the absolute lowest, but very low. So that doesn't bode well for flying long distance. But
Right.
They will fly to get up into their roost trees. They'll fly to cross rivers or roads. You'll see them cross occasionally, and primarily to escape predators. But they really are primarily moving on the ground.
You know, aside from hunters, what other predators do turkeys face?
Oh, there's a lot.
Really?
Yeah, most of the fur bearers will take a turkey. So bobcat is a big one. And we've actually seen an increase in the bobcat population, and I believe that's at least in part as a result of a booming turkey population and the recovery of turkeys. But fox, coyotes, fisher, I mean, really, they are a prey item, and anything out there would take a turkey if it had an opportunity.
And they're also, too, I understand from hunters, notoriously crafty. I mean, you have to really be patient if you want to hunt turkeys.
Yeah, they're not to be underestimated. You know, we have high success rates. Hunters have very high success rates. Better than 30% of hunters come home with a turkey. But it is a challenge. You've got to be very camouflaged, very careful that you don't move. You've got to be able to mimic a hen or gobbler, however you choose to do it, proficiently enough to bring a tom in. They're a challenge. They're very keen-sighted and they're watching.
Is there one thing that you want Vermonters to know about turkeys? What would that be?
Oh boy, there's a lot of things I want Vermonters to know about turkeys, and maybe I guess I would just say that you know, my goals for the coming years in this role would be to engage the public about turkey management through the big game planning process, as we discussed, to engage youths and try to get more youths involved, and to just generally promote this incredible success story in this preeminent, you know, game species here in Vermont, and celebrate the successes that we've had there.
Alrighty. Well, if for more information about turkeys or any other wildlife topic in Vermont, you can check the department's website. It is vtfishandwildlife.com. Chris, thank you so much. It's interesting to learn about these birds that, you know, you can see almost everywhere, which is a nice thing.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That's our program for today. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.